every single person from vendor to contractor to the leadership team throughout should be able to recite these, understand them, and know them by heart. And it's so simple, but so many organizations do not do this. And it's who we are, what we do, why we do it, and where we're going. Quick, short sentences, easy to recite, easy to understand, get rid of the jargon, get everybody aligned around that, and you will be shocked at the clarity and progress you see within your team when they understand at the top what the heck we're doing all of this for and why, right? That creates belief. It creates value because I see how I'm contributing to this bigger piece. And now I've got skin in the game because I'm a believer. I'm a part of this. I'm not just a cog in a wheel. I'm really a true contributor here, and my contributions matter.
If you're a leader and you're responsible for a team, do you currently consider it a high-performing team? If not, what do you think is the root cause behind why not? Is it your leadership? Is it culture? Is it people just aren't as loyal and hardworking as they used to be? There's some easy scapegoats there, but as ever, the truth is more nuanced, more complicated. To dig into these subjects, particularly around loyalty and high-performing culture, I'm joined today by the founder of Loyalty Ops, Mickey Anderson. We will be talking about what loyalty looks like, what a high-performing culture and a high-performing team looks like, how to create and sustain those kinds of organizations, some of the myths and misconceptions behind all of this as well, the role of leadership, and much more besides. So if you've ever found yourself struggling to realize the results with and in your team, this is the episode for you. Do stay to the end or check the show notes for all of the links to Mickey's website to learn more about Loyalty Ops, as well as visit my own site, leadingwithintegrity.co.uk, and perhaps sign up for my Integrity Leaders community. More on that at the end of the show. So without further ado, let's welcome Mickey aboard Leading with Integrity.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Mickey, welcome to Leading with Integrity. Lovely to have you on the show at last. Feels like this has been years in the making.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and to start us off, tell us a bit about your career journey so far. What you do today, why you do it, all of that sort of stuff.
For sure. I have built and run multiple companies. So I started off scaling up a fitness company for someone else, then ventured off and built two businesses myself, marketing agencies, and then ventured in to work with a consulting firm that had an offshore arm and a service firm arm as well. And, 10 years of learning and 18 months out of growth. It was fantastic. But I've worked in, dozens of fast growth and growth stage organizations and supported from strategy, from marketing and growth side, and now on the leadership side. And it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the word is eclectic, isn't it? You seem to have done a lot of different things.
I like to bring kind of a student perspective. I'm one of those odd people who loved being in school. And so any opportunity I have where I can learn something new and really dig in and become a student is where I thrive. So anytime I can get into a new place or new environment and pick brains and learn something, I get really excited. So I tend to make big jumps into new markets and new organizations.
Yeah. So you're not a fan of the comfort zone then?
No, I get bored way too easily. I'm the entrepreneurial bug, so to speak.
That's fair enough, but at least you recognise that. That's good. Yep. A lot of people don't until it's too late. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, all those companies you've run and been involved in and the different industries you've worked in, I mean, is there do you see common themes in the ones that really succeed or not?
My gosh, yes. So over the course of, running those organizations, growing those businesses, and then working within all of those different companies, most of my work at first was around growth and strategy. How do we scale this business up? How do we give them lead acquisition, build their teams up, give them all the tools and shiny things they need to grow? And on paper, most of these organizations look like they have everything they need. They've got good people, they've got recruitment running, they've got a great strategy, but there's always this friction. And it comes up every single time. And the core problem is they have a bunch of individual players working in parallel as opposed to a true cohesive force multiplying team. And that's really why I left that firm that I was working with to start Loyalty Ops, my company now, is to help companies take those individual players, get them cohesive and collaborating really with an output that 10x's any individual player or tool or technology could have. So it's typically, how do we get these people a structure and clarity so that they can work together as opposed to working in parallel?
Yeah, I'm always reminded of that cliche about things being greater than the sum of their parts. I feel like that for culture in an organization, that's spot on, I think.
Well, we're seeing it play out. One of my favorite places to see this play out is the Olympics. So I'm in Canada, and we watch a lot of hockey here in Canada, right? That's our national sport. And right now is the Olympic hockey tournament is on. And we're seeing that exact situation. The US team is stacked. They have all amazing NHL all-star players. They should be dominating, and they are struggling. And there's not team cohesion. We've seen this many times where you get a roster of 8 players and they just fumble in the moment because they're not playing as a team. But then there are teams with B and C players who are dominating, who are doing incredible underdog style championship winning. And it's just beautiful to see because it really is what leadership is all about. How do I get my team to perform at its best, not just bring in individual contributors?
Yeah, it makes me think as well. Now, I don't know anything about hockey, and I'm not going to cast any aspersions on any American athletes for obvious reasons, but it does make me think of that toxic high performer problem where the leadership are like almost scared of reining them in because they're such high performers. And so you can forgive almost all sins, can't you, in some organizations?
Yeah. It's a conundrum, but ultimately it's the role of the leader to be able to set direction and set the standard of how we work together. And regardless of how amazing a player is, that toxicity cascades and it demoralizes everyone else. And personally, I would rather have a really cohesive team of B and C players who work well together than have a team with one all-star player carrying the weight and causing toxicity throughout the organization, personally.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things, I think, in leadership where people misunderstand it quite frequently. I think one of them is about like what makes a high-performing team. And it's a natural assumption, isn't it? A high-performing team is a team of high performers, but that's not necessarily true, as you just said.
Yeah, it's not individual output, right? It's synchronized output. It's how do we get this, I like to call it a universal consciousness or a shared consciousness where people know where we're going, why, how we operate, how we do things, and they play together, supporting each other for the greater good, not just because I want to score more points myself and look good on the leaderboard.
Speaks to a great point around leadership and ego, I think. And I think the people who are really great at it are the ones who, everyone has a bit of ego, but they're able to set it aside when it matters.
Humility is huge in leadership, right? We'll see that. You'll have, sport is such a beautiful example of it because you get to see it live on television, right? You get a look into it that you don't normally get in organizations, but it's very similar where you'll have these kind of hot-headed, wild, egotistical coaches. And it's like, no wonder your team isn't living up to what you would expect them to, or they only had one fantastic season and just can't get it together afterwards. Whereas you have others who have a legacy coach who's been there, who's committed to people, who's humble, who puts the team first. Those are the organizations that end up winning year over year, season after season, and they don't just have kind of one blip.
Yeah, indeed. We won't mention the curling either.
Very entertaining, I will say that.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who very much doesn't follow sport of any kind, maybe Formula One on occasion, it takes there's a certain threshold for it to pass for me to become aware of it. And that one definitely crossed the threshold last week. Yeah.
I think it crossed the threshold. Curling in general got on people's radar, and a lot of people have never even heard of the sport. So, I mean,
there is something oddly hypnotic about it, I think. I don't know.
It's an odd sport. I mean, yeah, you can't help but stare. It's almost like, I hate to say it, but it's kind of like watching a car accident where you can't quite figure out what's going on. And so you just keep looking to see. Yeah. We do have a lot of people here who grew up with curling, so no offense.
I guess a lot of sports are odd if you look at them too hard. Anyway, moving on. So loyalty ops then, tell us a bit more about that. What's the origin story? How did you come up with the idea? All of that sort of thing.
Yeah. So while I was working with that firm, the problem became clear. And so I had to get scrappy. It wasn't necessarily my job, but it was. I needed to get these teams working together and collaborating. And it became clear there were a few things we could do pretty consistently to create traction for them. One was clarity, and two was structure, right? So if people don't know at the core what we're doing or why, where we're going, becomes very hard for them to make smart decisions aligned with the company goals. So how do we create clarity within the team? Very simple. We communicate, we take in input, we close feedback loops, right? It's not rocket science, but it's something that a lot of organizations skip. They don't effectively communicate. It's a megaphone to the team, and they think that's communication. That's just yelling. So how do we have real open conversations and discussions so there's understanding, shared belief and meaning in where we're going? That was step one. Step two is structure, oddly enough. We found that in the operations of the organizations, there was nothing really to support collaboration. Meetings were updates, right? And it was, here's the problem, team, go figure it out. And that really never resulted in much collaboration. It resulted in a few key players digging deep and coming up with solutions and throwing them at everyone else, or leadership telling everyone what to do. Neither of which super effective. And so we really focused on how do we create a structure where the team can come together, plan together, own their plans, present them forward, and then we can move forward and they have clarity. And they also have this great way of now communicating with each other and collaborating. And it created a ton of progress. And so when I left, I knew I wanted to do education where we could provide leaders, managers, and organizations with the education they needed to know what good looked like and how to proceed, as well as advisory services where we could come in and support them while they built out this clarity and structure for their teams. And so that's what Loyalty Ops really is at the core. We educate and we help support through advisory work for leaders within organizations to help them build out the clarity and the structure their teams need to thrive.
Nice. I mean, it sounds great, obviously. Yeah, I mean, that communication piece is so important, isn't it? And I almost think we need to just bin the word communication entirely because I feel like it's something that is too vague. It's too easily misunderstood.
Yeah, people assume communication is either I'm talking at you or I'm shooting you an email or a brief, and that's good enough. But we all know intuitively it's not. Yeah. For me, the big gap in communication and leadership is really the role modeling. Leaders tell people to do things that they don't do themselves. I spoke with a CEO 2 weeks ago who really wanted their teams to start doing after action reviews. So after a quarter, sit down, what went well, what didn't go well, what are we going to bring forward, what are we going to leave behind, how are we going to reset and learn from this so we don't just reset the same goals. But the leader didn't do those things. And the leader actively said, I don't do that. That's not for me. And I kind of laughed in the moment, but I was like, well, you wonder why your team doesn't do it? Like, if you're paying me for this. Yeah. But ultimately, it's really, if you want your team to have certain behaviors and standards, you have to live and breathe it, right? You have to be a part of that company DNA. Otherwise, it's just inconsistency and friction along the way. So one of the core things we focus on with communication is leadership modeling, right? How do we get you to commit to and behave the way you expect everyone else to so that they're following both what you say and what you do?
Yeah, leading by example. Absolutely. One of my favorite phrases in leadership. And it's so, like, on the face of it, it's so simple. And we get tied up in our own heads, I think, and maybe ego plays a part in it and laziness perhaps for some. So the example from my career, much smaller scale than that, I once had like a blazing row with someone I worked with about punctuality. because they were adamant that if I was 2 minutes late because of traffic or whatever, that I was being unprofessional and it was bad behaviour. And the average time they themselves would get to the office was about 11:15 on a good day. And it's just like, it's hypocrisy, isn't it? That whole do as I say, not as I do. It's just not, it's not leadership. It's bad management, and it's just not leadership at all. And I don't get why it's so prevalent.
I've heard so many excuses, and this is the part. So whenever I'm working with a leader who is wanting a change in behavior from their team, and there's so many examples of this. I know one where they wanted their team to start sending out briefings before meetings and agendas before meetings. Like, I'm not coming to a meeting unless there's an agenda. It's like, great. When's the last time you sent an agenda? They're like, oh, I don't do that. It's like, tell me why. Well, I'm too busy. My meetings are more important. I'm there to make decisions, not to be briefed. And I listened for a bit, and then I summarized back to them. Okay, so let's walk through these, things that you told me. You're too busy. Do you think your team is busy? Oh yeah, they're busy. Okay. You are there to make decisions. Do you think your team doesn't need to make decisions? Do you think the information needed for them to be able to walk me through each of these objections? And we kind of walked through it. And then I said, okay, great. Now, if your team came to you and had those same objections, I'm too busy, I need to be able to make decisions faster, I need to do this and that and the other thing, how would you respond? And they, had to grit through their teeth a little bit as they're, well, I would tell them this. And I'm like, okay, I want you to listen to that feedback back to yourself. Because no matter how busy you are, no matter how, many decisions you have to make, you have to be able to commit to set everyone up for success, not just you, right? Yeah. You are a part of this team. You are not the management disconnected. You are truly a person on this team leading and directing. And so you have to be able to commit to it. So I challenged them. I said, before you delegate to your team this standard of sending agendas and briefings, I want you to spend the next 90 days. And for every meeting where you're a contributor, I want you, where you're leading the meeting, if you're the facilitator, you're going to send the agenda and the brief before. Watch what happens. And they puffed and puffed. And I challenge you. I don't think you can do it. And of course, they're like, oh. So they did it for 90 days. And within that 90 days, every single person on the executive team and the management team started sending agendas and briefings in advance. And it was so simple. But that cascade, he didn't even have to say anything. He just started doing it. And people went, oh, this is the new standard. Okay. And the behavior changed. And so the meeting afterwards was very entertaining, where he thanked me and, through his teeth. But it's not hard to connect the dots for us. But sometimes in leadership, we think our importance trumps these behaviors. But that's not true at all, right? I think of myself and most leaders almost like a cowboy, where yes, you might be leading the ranch. Yes, you might be the first horse out there. Yes, you might do all these things, but you also have to be willing to go into the stables and shovel stuff you don't want to. You have to be able to get your hands dirty and do what everyone else does. You're not above any work within this organization. And that is a challenge, but it's also a beautiful part of leadership, right? It really does connect you to your team in a way that otherwise you wouldn't be.
Yeah, I think so too. And the frustrating thing with that example, of course, is that the idea there was really good. That's a great way to solve problems with meetings, like set the agenda, make them about making decisions, not just a talking shop. I mean, that's great. Like, you've correctly identified the thing, so why won't you do it yourself?
Exactly. It's a little mind-blowing, but this is the work, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we could go off on a whole 2-hour tangent just complaining about meeting culture as well, I think.
Meetings are one of the most powerful ways to shift the culture in an organization. I can very much nerd out on it, but nobody wants to talk meetings.
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of things, isn't it? Like success or loyalty or leadership itself. It comes down to how you define it and what its purpose is. And I think too many meetings are just, I mean, they've almost become like professional subject, but social gatherings kind of thing, don't they? Where you just all just sit in a room and talk about stuff you start out at an hour and then it's the whole afternoon's gone and you've not really achieved anything. And it's
one of my favorite challenges to leaders who are complaining about meetings or think they have too many is to Google search Harvard Business Review meeting cost calculator. So Harvard Business Review has this amazing calculator, and you can plug in who's attending and their salaries, and it will give you an output of the cost of every meeting. And if that doesn't motivate you to have better and less frequent meetings, I don't know what will, because it's usually a mind-blowing number when you add it up across the organization over the year. And that is such a quick, simple, tactical fix to improve your meetings. And people like to focus on strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to like the kind of what do they call it, the blue sky thinking, that sort of the thought process. And I get that some people, they have to verbalize as they think.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. That's fine. I'm okay with that, as long as you know that's the purpose of the meeting before you go into it, and accept that that's not going to work for everyone, and others have to work differently for it to be effective for them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, that cost thing, I made the mistake of doing that in a previous job, and I was not popular for a little while. It wasn't out of the ordinary to have at least one 4-hour meeting every day. And that was for the entire management team. It was just absolutely ridiculous. And not to mention like the mental drain of doing that. And then the feeling of guilt and frustration afterwards, because you come out of it and you realize, well, we didn't decide anything. While we were in there, we haven't done any work. While we were in there, half of our teams couldn't do any work because they were stuck at decision points and needed input from us. Plus, we're all a little bit angry because it was quite a contentious meeting, actually. So this is maybe not the best thing for our company culture.
Yeah. Defining the purpose of the meetings and then making sure you split out the meetings so they do have a true sole purpose, right? It's okay to have collaborative brainstorming meetings. You don't need one every week with, all those people for 4 hours. You might need one every month or every quarter that's defined, and this is what we're doing and how we're going to work together. And then the other meetings can be decision meetings or input meetings, whatever it is. But when you try and smush everything into one meeting every single time, it just becomes a mess, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it is just not knowing a better way of doing it and just thinking that's the way we work. That's how it's done.
This is collaboration. It's like,
just because everyone's in the room doesn't mean they're collaborating.
Yeah. Oh, so much fun.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So skipping back again to communication, I'm 100% with you as well. Like it's not about transmission. I think I prefer the word dialogue rather than communication because that has built in the two-way nature of it. Which, yeah, again, so many concepts in leadership, I think we misunderstand them and we would all benefit more from thinking of them as two-way streets. So loyalty is another one. Trust, respect, communication, dialogue, either one.
Yeah.
I mean, what are the secrets in your experience to, first of all, setting up that culture for success and then sustaining it as a high performance culture for a high performing team?
Yeah, like I said, a lot of it's clarity and a lot of it's structure. So instead of communication, I like to use the term clarity, right? Because it implies that you haven't just finished at communicate. We have a flywheel that we like to teach leaders that encapsulates communication as just one small piece, right? And so communicate's important. We need to be able to share our thoughts, our direction, our ideas, our vision. But then there's the next phase, which is collect, where we gain feedback, reality from the ground, information, insight, context, collaboration. And then the next is commit. Okay, what's the decision we're making and the direction we're taking? Where have we actually come to an agreement here and held each other accountable and designated ownership? And then the last is continuously improve. Great. What have we learned from this? And then we move back into communicate. And as you work through that flywheel, it creates this beautiful learning mechanism for an organization, but it also creates an environment where the team feels seen, heard, understood. They believe in the mission. They know who owns it and what their responsibilities are, who's accountable, and we're learning from it. And it's not just a one way, do this, do that. So that's huge. The other piece is the structure. I think we plug in these out of the box operating systems, and there's nothing against them. They're fabulous. There's many of them. People will use things like OKRs or EOS and those things. And they assume that that's going to solve their collaboration and performance problems. It's like, no, those are great structures and supports for your organization's operations. Yes, absolutely. But there's a lot of gaps in there that you have to fill yourself as a company with your company DNA. So the structures like, how do we set up collaboration? How often do we create an after action review or debrief after execution of a project, right? How do we distill learnings? Where do we have a shared source of truth that we can all come back to? And so those things are really what create that culture where your culture is operationalized into behaviors. It's not just, 4 words up on a wall that we say are our values and that's our culture. That doesn't tell anyone anything, right? That's just pretty.
Indeed.
So those 2 pieces are huge. Those are the main things that we focus on, is that flywheel across the board, not just for leaders, but for the team themselves as well. They have to be able to go through it and understand it. And then how do we set them up for success with structures so this becomes behavior and operationalized so it's sustainable over the long term?
Yeah. So you said a word there which I'm going to pick up on, because and the word is context.
Mm-hmm.
I think in my experience, so I completely agree with everything you said. Some of those gaps that you're talking about, I think overall the goal has to be making people feel like they're valued, like
Mm-hmm.
their inputs are valued. They're not just, you're not just shouting into the void because no one's listening, sort of thing. And I think for me, I've always found giving them that context is one of the most powerful and frankly easy ways to do that. Because whatever the goal is, or the KPI, whatever the framework is, we need to do this thing. Okay, but why? Like, if you want me on board with this, explain to me why I need to do this, other than because that's what you're paid for, because that's inadequate in this day and age.
It's funny. So we saw this revolution in business a while ago where they adopted a ton of military practices and mentality, right? And one of them was the need to know mentality of, I'm only going to give you the information that you need to know. Well, and this, of course, from the military is more from a security standpoint, right? That you see this in a lot of organizations, but that transcended where we stopped sharing context and left people to make decisions with way less information and context than they needed to be able to make a right decision. And then we criticize and hold them accountable to that decision, even though they were set up for failure from the start. One of the things we do, it's the very first step we take with an organization, is what we call clear intent. And yes, it's absolutely stolen from the military's mission command mentality, but we've tweaked it to be a more performance culture environment. But you're answering these 4 questions for your organization, and every single person from vendor to contractor to the leadership team throughout should be able to recite these, understand them, and know them by heart. And it's so simple, but so many organizations do not do this. And it's who we are, what we do, why we do it, and where we're going. Quick, short sentences, easy to recite, easy to understand, get rid of the jargon, get everybody aligned around that, and you will be shocked at the clarity and progress you see within your team when they understand at the top what the heck we're doing all of this for and why, right? That creates belief. It creates value because I see how I'm contributing to this bigger piece. And now I've got skin in the game because I'm a believer. I'm a part of this. I'm not just a cog in a wheel. I'm really a true contributor here, and my contributions matter. And when you don't have that, it's so easy. We do this test in executive teams where we'll ask them each to recite, okay, tell me how you explain what you do to a stranger, and you. And it's always vastly different. So it's like, all right, let's wonder how the sales team says it, how the customer service team says it, how the QA team says it, how the internal engineers say it. And it's all different. Now, what do you think that's doing for our organization? We use this analogy where it's like rowing, team rowing. We have a group of individuals on a boat and they're all rowing hard, but they're completely out of sync. And so the boat is churning and just moving and sloshing and going nowhere. But what happens when you get them rowing hard and in rhythm? We start making progress. We start moving forward. And that's really what it's all about. And that one exercise is so profound. We love to do that with organizations right off the bat.
Yeah, it's a great analogy, isn't it? I think it's, I don't know, I guess there's a natural human sort of nature, human behavior phenomenon at the center of this around, I've worked so hard to get to where I am. I've earned the right to this information. You haven't. So why should I share it with you? That kind of thing. And it's very natural. You see it all the time, but it's also so damaging to exactly this kind of problem that we're talking about. And I've worked with some really amazing people over the years and some terrible leaders as well. Sometimes in the same individual.
That inconsistency. Yeah.
And it was, I could never get them over that sort of, you need to share this information. No, it's like, they don't need to know that. Exactly that phrase.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to know that. Well, okay. Strictly speaking, no, they don't need to know it. But if you tell them, they might be better at that, or they might come up with a better way of doing it, or they might be more innovative, more creative, more bought in, more loyal to you as their leader because you've shared a secret with them, in inverted commas. And I just, I sometimes felt like banging my head against the wall trying to persuade people of the value of that.
Yeah, it's, do you want to be right or do you want the company to win? That's really what it comes down to. And ultimately, culture is what leadership tolerates.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And if the leadership team tolerates that kind of behavior and has distrust, it goes both ways, right? What you put out is what you get from your team. If you have distrust, no, I'm not going to share that with you because I don't trust you. Yes, of course, there are places and times when certain things can't be shared. We get that. But there is a level of information that everyone needs to be able to make good decisions and bring their best to the team. And it's on the organization to determine what makes sense for them. But if it varies by leader, and there's inconsistency in what information and how it's shared and who it's shared to, and that's not transparent, that creates a culture of distrust and toxicity. It's really aligning. This is how we work here. This is how we operate. We're a part of this team. We all play by these rules. We all come together and we're all on this team going for this thing. And if you can't be on the team, get off. It's that simple.
Yeah. Which is perfectly fair enough, I think,
Exactly.
right? Because that's a good, again, it's something leaders I think are quite afraid of, is people leaving, but sometimes that can be a good thing. Like if they're leaving because you've shared as much as you can, you've given them that full context, everyone's aligned on the mission, the values and all those sort of things, but these small group of people have said, actually, thank you for letting me know, but that's not really what I'm about. I'm going to go somewhere else. That's good. You shouldn't be afraid of that.
Oh, it's fantastic because you're opening up room for people who are going to be aligned, who are going to be a part of this culture. And I mean, we all know one of the biggest mistakes leaders make is holding on to somebody they know isn't a good fit for too long, right? We've heard that from countless leaders time and time again. And that's what it comes down to. It's recognizing that direct is kind and a decision is usually better than no decision, right? Even if it's a bad decision. Because you learn from it and you move forward and you see progress. But if you're too afraid to get off and make a decision around whether I keep or let go of this person, then you've already kind of failed, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's the word kind is key as well, I think, because it's not, just because someone doesn't fit your kind, they're not a good fit. Again, like I'm not super happy with that phrase, but everyone knows what I mean when I say it. That whole sort of like whether it's a culture or values or you just don't think they work hard enough or whatever it is. That might be true. That doesn't mean they're a bad person or a bad employee or anything like that. And again, there's that kind of false conflation, isn't there? Leaders and managers in particular are like, well, okay, look, they don't fit here, therefore they're bad. Therefore they don't deserve my kindness. They don't deserve a nice departure or whatever, or a nice exit process. We're just going to get rid of them as quickly as possible. And it very quickly gets contentious and then lawyers are involved in it. It's all very messy, totally unnecessary as well. I'd much rather be like, look, it didn't work out. Can I help you find your next role? Something like that.
And usually it snowballs because a series of critical conversations were avoided that should have been had. So when your spidey senses first start to go off and you're, oh no, this person might not be a good fit. They might not thrive here. Have the conversation immediately. Hey, here's what I'm seeing. Here's the behavior I'm recognizing. Here's the challenge that I'm faced with. And here's some of the decisions we might need to come to together. I want to be direct and let you know this in advance so we can have a conversation around what needs to happen to set you up for success or make a better decision. And the sooner you can have that conversation, the better, because that will lead to learning, to growth, and the person can decide, do I want to assimilate? Do I want to, move forward and progress with this company in this way? Or do I want to make a different choice? But if you avoid that conversation, it snowballs and ends up becoming you don't fit and you don't even know why. You never got warning, you don't understand. That's where the contention really starts to drive. So having uncomfortable conversations is a part of the game. The more often you have them, the better. It means you're having real dialogue, as you said, and you're setting your people up for success. It's like a coach who never tells the player that they're hitting the ball poorly. I'm just going to keep putting them in and hope they learn. Maybe they'll get better. No, right? Put them in the batting cages and work on it and tell them they're missing their shot here. That's the part of leadership that no one wants to be the bad guy. We all want to be liked. There's a point at which you need to be able to step up and be the leader they need, not the person, the friend that they want.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible to walk a bit of a line there. I think you can be likable without avoiding that conflict. And I think you can also be honest without creating conflict.
And I think a lot of it's respect, right?
Yeah.
People like who they respect often, and they like them more if we have things in common. So you can absolutely, play that to your favor. You can live your values, be open and honest. And if you have people who are culturally aligned to a point, it's pretty similar. You're going to have natural similarities that you can build bridges with. And you can have direct conversations because you built those bridges. But if you haven't connected with your people and you're just going at them, that's when you get a little bit of that kind of shock and discomfort in the relationship.
Yeah. We're going to go on a bit of a tangent now, I think, potentially.
Let's do it.
Because, so you've sparked something in my brain. So in conversations about, like, say, diversity, for example, and like groupthink and things like that, I wonder how this sits within cultural alignment, because in my head, different points of view are valuable and better than everyone agreeing all the time. So how do you make sure that you're not kicking out the dissenting voices, let's say, because of culture fit, and avoid that becoming an excuse to just avoid disagreement, because actually disagreement is valuable?
That's a beautiful point. And one of the things people don't do is actually define their culture clearly enough to be able to make that call. Is this a cult? We gift wrap everything in culture fit, right? Oh, I'm hiring for culture fit, even though all I have are 4 words on the wall that are values and an idea in my head of what our culture is that I can't articulate and no one knows. Like that's not a culture fit problem, right?
Yeah,
That's a clarity issue.
They didn't laugh at my jokes in the interview. Bad culture fit. Like,
but it's true. We love to say culture fit is just a blanket reason when we haven't really defined it. And so step 1 is defining your culture. And what you'll find when you do that is you'll have that clear intent we talked about, right? Who we are, what we do, why we do it, and where we're going. That's your North Star. That's the anchor point that everything else flows from. But then you have your core values. And most organizations have them. And they have some loose definition of them that they plaster somewhere on the website as a marketing tactic. But the real work is taking those and defining them into behaviors. How do we do things here universally that align with this value, right? And how do we not do things here? And what you'll find when we look at individuals who are saying they have diverse perspectives, they come from different backgrounds, they usually fit these behaviors and these values, which makes them a culture fit, even though they think differently and come from different places. And one of the best tools that we can use are personality profiling, right? A lot of leaders think it's mumbo jumbo and they've done a million of them, but ultimately it gives you a shared language and understanding of the ways people think and decide and behave. And when you know that, you can identify gaps in your team. If I have, for example, I've 3 persuaders and a captain on a team, if I'm looking at predictive index as an example. Okay, I've got really persuasive, salesy people who don't have attention to detail, and I've got one person who loves to take charge. I'm missing some technical background. I'm missing some, the attention to detail pieces. And you can find those personality profiles in a vast array of diverse backgrounds and fill in those gaps. And so when I think of diversity, equity, inclusion, when I think of building culture in an organization, you want great diversity because it's going to fill in gaps where you need. But the key is to build that cohesion and that opportunity for them to truly work together where disagreement is open. We can have a true conversation around us not agreeing on the path forward and then work together to come up with a plan. We might not agree on the direction, but we can respect each other enough and allow each other the opportunity to have a conversation around it. So there's discomfort in bringing in new and different that people avoid, but it's so important and valuable. So step 1, define your culture so you can actually articulate it and identify those people, and you'll be surprised at how many people fit into that. And then step 2 is find that shared language around behavior and personality, and how do we fill in gaps to make sure that we are setting ourselves up for success and not falling into groupthink.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know about the personality tests, I have to say. I've had some bad experiences with those in the past.
Share what went wrong for you.
I mean, I'm on the fence, let's say.
Yeah.
The listeners have definitely heard this story before, but just briefly. So it was in the typical cliche, like away day context. There were some general grumblings and everyone knew it. This was the sticking plaster over the like gushing chest wound sort of approach. And what part of this away day was we all did, I think it was Myers-Briggs. It's a long time ago now. I forget. It was probably that one. And then they had the wheel. They had a giant version of it on the floor. You can probably see where this is going. And then so they said, okay, now everyone's done the test. Go and find your result on the wheel and everyone stand on their spot. And the reason why this was a bad experience for me is on one side of the wheel was everyone in the company, and on the other side of the wheel was me. With maybe a few at like the 9 and 3 positions, but it was isolating. Let's say it that way.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, for the leadership team, it's probably pretty eye-opening to recognize, oh no, we have, half this wheel is empty and we have one key person over on that side. We need more people like them. We need to fill in the gaps. You would think, but I mean,
no.
That's not necessarily the reality we live in.
So not in that example, anyway.
Yeah. I studied psychometrics. I did my master's in counseling psychology. And so, I mean, there's pros and cons. People can use it as a box to put people in and check off. And, that's not the healthiest or the best way to look at it. It's a tool like many other tools, and it gives you a shared language. The reason why I like them, more so for the executive team than anyone, is because it allows you to recognize behaviors where there's usually yin and yang, positive and negative behaviors around character traits, right? So if a person is, a dominant personality, there's positive sides to being a dominant personality. There's also some negatives that can come out. And when you have that shared language, a leadership team can say, hey, I noticed that you're starting to lean towards the controlling, micromanaging tendencies here. And I want you to be aware of it because I know it's something that we can work on together to make sure that we can support our team better. And when you have that shared language, it's easier to understand the players around you. It's easier to look out for potentially positive or negative behaviors to see where we can bring out the best in people. It can also, with great power comes great responsibility, right? You can use it for good. You can use it to really isolate, intimidate, and push people around. And use it as a box to check. That's not what the tool is about, right? It's just another way to ensure we're aligned on communication. So there are definitely guardrails. I'm sure there are many horror stories about them. For me, it starts with the executive leadership team. They go first and they go alone. Once they understand, align, get it, can really feel what it's like to work with it and how challenging it can be, then and only then do we say, okay, great, who do we want to roll this out to? Does this make sense for organization? But if they just throw it on everyone else, that's where, again, it's that leadership modeling piece. We see a lot of challenge.
I think where I see the value of them today is for that. It's like the supporting the self-awareness part of it. So like as an individual tool, understand yourself and your tendencies better. Because I think the other problem I have with doing them publicly, especially if everyone knows they're going to be public, is it biases their answers.
Yeah.
And so it'll be more about how they want to be perceived instead of how they're actually like honestly reflecting on themselves and their behaviors. Whereas if you're only doing it for yourself, that bias kind of goes away a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's positive and negatives again. When you use it, I mean, the first step of leadership, know thyself, right? Lead yourself, understand yourself. If you don't do that, you're not leading anybody, right? And so absolutely a powerful tool to understand yourself. The other thing too is like the leaders, the organization, we need some education on these tools, right? We're not just throwing them at people saying this is who you are and how we're grading you. That's not going to be fair to anyone. And if you are going to leverage them publicly, let's make sure we all understand what the tool is for. This is not a box we're putting you in. We know that the chances of this truly aligning with you 50-50, but it gives us a shared language and understanding. And when you can see these character traits, we can leverage them as just one of many tools. That's really what it's about. There needs to be other structures and supports for your individuals to support their behavior and them thriving and their performance, not just a disc profile, right? Like, come on.
Yeah. I mean, to be a
Mhm.
bit self-aware and honest as well, I'll declare my own bias that a trigger for me is feeling like I'm put in a box. So
Ah, I hate being
probably
put in a
didn't help.
box. A
Yeah,
hundred
probably didn't
percent
help.
agree. 100% agree. Yes, yes, it's so
Yeah.
true.
But no, I mean, you're absolutely right, though. I think it's how you use it, how you handle that conversation as well. It's very important to do that. And I think the phrase you used was guardrails, wasn't it? I think that's, yeah, you've got to use, it's like any tool, isn't it? It's how you use it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the
Cool.
way you educate people on it, right? If we think another tool right now that we're obviously seeing a lot of is AI. Everybody's in love with throwing AI agents into everything. And it's very entertaining because it's like, oh, we've seen this before. But it's like any tool. If you throw a tool at a bunch of people without those guardrails, without the education, without the language and understanding, without leadership really understanding it, you're going to set yourself up for failure as well. So it's not just personality, it's any tool. You need to really be thoughtful in how you implement tools within your organization to amplify and support your team.
100%. I feel like we've probably already answered the next question in our roundabout way anyway. But so when it comes to things like loyalty and culture, what would be your pick for the number one myth that leaders fall for? Have we already
This
done
has
it? I don't know.
changed.
Has it?
No, not entirely. So this one has changed for me over the years. And right now, the big myth that I'm seeing that is just prolific is leaders chasing unicorns to save the business, right? And a unicorn can come in many different shapes and forms. It can come in, I'm going to hire unicorn A players. That's all I'm going to focus on is bringing in those amazing unicorns. And that's going to impact our output. It's going to change everything. AI, technology. I'm going to grab those very expensive, very rare, very hard to integrate unicorns and throw them at my team, thinking that it's going to be an amazing amplifier of performance. It's not, right? It's just not. That's not what's going to win the day. That's not what's going to win the century. It's not what's going to help your business live a legacy. Unicorns often work best alone, in isolation, as a sole contributor. You can have a few of those. Those can be strategically used and leveraged here and there. But if you think that's going to be the thing that sets you up for success, you're in for a very expensive recruitment bill and an underperforming team.
A great point. I hadn't even thought of that. I was going to say it's like that old truism about if it was really that easy and successful, then everyone would be doing it. But I don't know if that applies because everyone is doing it, like with AI, and it's not working, but everyone's still doing it.
Yeah, they think they are. Well, everyone's looking for the lightning in a bottle. They want the magic that's going to just, shoot us to the stars. And it's like,
the overnight
good luck
success.
with that. Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, I think I prefer the cliche about nothing worth doing is easy. I think that's more applicable these days.
I do for a particular reason, right? There's merit to that because what we've learned through psychology and through behavioral psychology and through teams is that hard work and suffering bonds people, right? And so if it's easy, your team's probably not going to bond, which is probably not going to contribute to the cohesion and to the progress you want to see. And so, yeah, we want the fastest, most efficient path forward, but we also need to grind together, right? Because if you want to go far, you go together. You want to go fast, go alone. But most of us want to go far with our organization. So there is absolutely merit in like, hey, let's work together and do this hard thing the hard way and be better for it.
Yeah. We might have just accidentally hit on a positive aspect of bad leadership there. The people, say what you like about those terrible leaders, the people who work for them bond. Like they are still in touch decades later, probably.
I worked with an organization who had what you would call a toxic leader. I don't like to label it, but the behaviors and the interactions, the relationship, it was a bad scenario. It wasn't a good fit for the culture of the organization, for the team. And you're absolutely right. So that team they were suffering. It was painful. They were bonding. They were struggling. When that team had the leader leave and a new leader was brought in, everyone loves to contribute to having a great leader, right? That's what makes the team amazing. And I think a significant portion of why they were able to move forward and really grow in the way we all knew it could. With this new leader, it was less about the leader and more about the fact that the team had bonded so strongly and now had this opportunity to work on what made sense in a way that made sense. Like that to me was the real magic that happened there. It wasn't just the leadership transition. It was that bonding that created this massive belief in who we are as a company, our culture, what we're all here for. Because it was a nonprofit. They believed in the mission and vision and they were all there for a reason. And that transition, it was a beautiful transition. It was terrible that they had to go through it, but boy, like just seeing them now is really incredible.
Yeah. It's I don't know. We're at risk of promoting bad leaders on purpose now.
We've all had them. I think there's a point at which like you have to go through at least one or two bad leaders in your life to have, and it's like failure, right? You want to win more when you know what failure feels like sometimes, when you know what losing is like. So I think you learn a lot from both good and bad leaders, learn what not to do and who I don't want to become, as well as, those great leaders.
Yeah, I agree. I think it helps you recognize the really good ones as well, because you've got that
Absolutely.
contrast. We might have already answered this one as well, or at least in a roundabout way, but I'd say, culture building is something that I think it's fair to say a lot of CEOs either really struggle with it or they just don't see it as a priority. Maybe sometimes both and one leads to the other. Why do you think that is, though? Is there an underlying cause for this or not?
Yes. Most people think culture is sentiment and engagement. And it's like, people are happy. That means we have a good culture. No. You can have a happy team that loses all the time. And that to me is not good culture, right? But culture is really about the performance of the team. It's getting the best out of the team, letting them thrive in a sustainable way, long term, right? That to me is what it's all about. And when we mislabel culture for sentiment and happy people, it's really easy to deprioritize it and throw it to HR and say, throw more parties. That's not going to help anybody. So as a leader, recognizing that the culture is the way that your teams work together and perform together in alignment with the mission, vision, and values of the company, that tends to shift priorities. The big mistake they make is delegating or relegating culture to either HR or to management, thinking that I as a leader need to be up and out, not down and in, which there's truth to that. You need to be the visionary and set direction. But at the same time, a core pillar of leadership is setting and maintaining the culture of the organization. And you have to support your managers and your team members in creating those structures and creating those standards and living and breathing that cultural DNA that you want within the company. And very few leaders are prepared to do that dirty work of getting in and really creating those high performing teams. They'd much rather relegate that to management.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean when you say there's happy teams that don't perform. Having said that, I also think happy people generally perform better. I guess it comes back to why they're happy, doesn't it? Yeah. Or not happy, I suppose.
Well, I think happy is kind of fickle, right? Happy is kind of fickle. Purposeful, knowing that I have purpose, knowing that I'm a contributor, that I'm valued and respected, that to me is far more weighty and important than happy. Happy, yeah, we want some happy here. I don't want to be miserable all the time. I want to enjoy my work for the most part. But I can tell you, doing hard things is hard work. And you're going to, right? It's not going to be easy and it's not going to be happy and you're not going to love every minute of it. But when it's purposeful and you're connected to that, that's when we're really moving. That's when you'll see people will thrive, they'll push, and they'll do so without hitting that burnout because they understand the bigger picture and the context. And there's meaning behind the sacrifice and the work that we're doing. It's not just for a paycheck so I don't get fired. We're going towards something instead of being afraid of something.
Yeah, I think I agree. Happy is maybe not the best word. It's a nice word though. But I think what we mean in the workplace context when we're saying it, whether we realize it or not, it's about like that purpose, fulfillment, the feeling of like you're making a difference, like what you do matters to something, even if it's just the company. And I do think that largely has to come from the top. I don't think. There are people in the world who can they'll do that for themselves and they don't need help with it. But at a team level, like if the leadership isn't thinking about that and intentionally doing things to move those levers and whatever analogy you like, it's probably not going to happen, is it?
Exactly. You might get little blips of it inconsistently and through individuals, but to actually get it sustainably through the full organization, it has to be leadership driven. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. And then as for the kind of the culture versus vision and mission, the inward versus the outward, I don't know. I've only ever worked in small businesses. So in my experience, the first and main job of the leader is the people.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I get there's always that PR bit, as I dismissively phrase it, the outward focus bit. And I get that's part of the job. But to me, it's more like I don't know, 20-80 at most, sort of split between those.
The way I like to describe it is the leader has two pillars of their role. One is grow the company, and one is set and maintain the culture of the company. You can grow the company through your people. You set and maintain the culture of your company through your people, right? So at the core, people is a fundamental component of both of those. You're not going to grow with not good people. You're not going to grow with people who aren't thriving. You're not going to have good culture without good people or people thriving. So to me, there's a lot of ways to go about it, and the tactics will vary, and the day-to-day job, depending on the scale and size of the business, will vary. But at the core, that's really what it comes down to. Are we growing? And is our culture thriving?
I like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Simple.
I'm going to steal that. No, I think that's a really great way to look at it, actually. And it kind of it almost takes out that conflict that feels like it's naturally built into that conversation, which doesn't need to be there. Let's turn back to the more optimistic side of it. What has been your best experience or your best memory of being led?
I feel like I'm so lucky. I've had so many incredible leaders, coaches, mentors over my career. I think it's what helped me get to where I am. Absolutely. Back when I was in sport, I was a swimmer. I was a D1 swimmer back in university, and I had some amazing coaches who believed in me, who saw what I could do. They saw potential. They were committed to me as a whole human, not just as you need to race this race and get these points, right? So from sport into my professional career, I've been fortunate. I had an incredible founder who I worked with for many years. And I mean, we vibed so well because we aligned values wise. We both were very people focused leaders. We both wanted our people to thrive, and we knew that that was going to be the thing that set us apart and allowed us to grow. And really, it was seeing the whole human, right? As much as leaders, we have objectives, we have things to do. I mean, this person, they know who they are. But they have big goals and big ambitions of an exit. And like there was a lot going on, but we always knew, and they always saw that I wasn't just a gear to turn that lever, that notch to get the company to grow. I was a whole human who showed up with a whole life and family and all these things. And they saw that and worked with me as a whole human, not just that key contributor. So for me, that was a huge lesson. And you can't really separate work from home, right? It's not work-life balance. It's all together as a whole person. And if you can see that, recognize it, respect it in your people, you're going to get way more out of them and out of yourself and your relationship with them than you ever would if it was just a JD, do the job and go.
A hog piece. I mean, it's everything we've been talking about, isn't it, really? It's about how people feel valued, etc. I always like hearing stories like that. I hear too many about bad leaders, and I have too many about bad leaders.
I'm so lucky. So I will tell you the thing that gives me hope right now, because we've all heard the horror stories and had the horror stories of leaders. The thing that gives me hope now is every single organization I go into now to advise or work with, the leaders, they get it and they genuinely want to do it. They really do want to support their people. They want to step up and be the leader that they want to be and their people need. And that true kind of beautiful intent is what gives me so much hope, because they're just missing the how, right? They haven't necessarily had great role models to anchor from. They haven't been given structures to help them leverage their strengths and fill in their gaps or weaknesses. And they just haven't been provided those tools and resources. And once they're armed with that, the transformation's been incredible across so many companies of different sizes. So it really does give me so much hope, from CEOs to executive teams, all the way through emerging leaders and internal managers. The desire is there. We're just missing the tools and a language to be able to communicate around it.
Yes. Yeah, I think similarly, like conversations like this, doing this podcast is what gives me hope for the future. But also, like I've yet to have a conversation with a leader who was like, no, I want to be terrible. I don't trust people. I'm doing this on purpose. I hate them all, that sort of thing. At least not seriously. They occasionally want to make a joke about it. But, and I think that's kind of, it's that faith in humanity bit for me. People do, by and large, they genuinely want to do right by others. They want to create nice working environments that people don't get depressed working in and aren't suffering stress and burnout every week and all that sort of thing. And you're right. I think part of it is the how, and then the other part of it is the culture at like a societal level, like workplace culture as a whole. I think there's still a few hangovers from the production line era and the Industrial Revolution and the workhouses and all that sort of horrible stuff in history. We still haven't quite shooken off, have we? But
and this is one of those epiphanies that I like to kind of spark a conversation with leaders too, because we'll talk about that, about, you know, how much they want to be innovators and how much they want to do things differently. And they see themselves as these innovative, new thinkers with big ideas. And then yet they fall back into these old traditional patterns that we know don't work. And, you know, and so just calling it as it is and being able to say, hey, look, I know this is who you want to be, but there's this disconnect between the activities and behaviors and structures you've set up and the leader and the organization that you genuinely want. So what we need to do is fix this alignment and make that shift for you. And it's going to be hard and it's going to take time, but ultimately you and I both know that's going to be the key to your success. So like, let's do it. And once they see that and that connection, oh no, I am doing that, it becomes a lot easier to get over that hump. But a lot of times they don't think about it. There's just this kind of obliviousness to it because they're focused on the L as opposed to the N.
Yes. So one of the examples where I find it most like fascinating, this sort of issue is the whole like the return to work, the return to office argument. I can't help, I have to laugh so I don't cry, but the irony of it where they're making it about productivity and they're completely missing the fact or choosing to ignore the fact that actually, I mean, there's plenty of evidence by this point, people are more productive when they work from home because first of all, they don't have like the mind drain of the commute. So they're not already like half asleep from fighting through the tube or the motorways or whatever by the time they get to the office. But also the time spent doing that, they're now working instead. And their breaks are shorter because they're at home, so they probably feel a little bit guilty, so they do a bit of extra work. So the employers have been benefiting from work from home. But now they're like, oh, people aren't working as hard, so let's get them back into the office. But they'll be less productive if you do that. Yeah.
It cracks me up. And again, I mean, those companies, it's very clear that they haven't defined their culture and what makes them who they are, and they haven't properly articulated that. If you pre-COVID, you know, were a culture where like in real life that's our standard, like most were. And then through COVID, you were like, we're making this shift and we're not really going to talk about it. And we're not really going to talk about what happens in the future. And we're just going to leave you hanging. And because we want to make sure that we don't lose you and we have leverage over you, like that's just an unhealthy situation. And it's not going to get the best out of your people. There are obviously positives to being together. There are positives to being at home. And for you as an organization, it's like, there's lots of ways to do this. There's lots of different models. There's hybrid, there's a combination, there's having, like, you have to know who you are as a company and what your culture is and the purpose, the true purpose of getting people together, why it matters, how it matters, and how you're going to maximize it so people get the best out of it before you just throw blanket policies on people. It's a little bit infuriating. And I get why some companies do it. It's a part of their cultural DNA to have people in. They didn't necessarily communicate that well. They didn't necessarily tactically do that well. And maybe it's a hindrance in some ways. To each their own. But if you're just throwing blanket policies on people without properly communicating, without like, there's so many ways to do this wrong. So it's a nuanced conversation. But I would say, unfortunately, right now, the vast majority are doing a terrible job and setting their people up for just absolute failure.
Yeah. I don't know if it is because there's nuances there or and people are refusing to see them, or if it's just a bit simpler than we're making it. I do think as well that it's blaming the wrong thing, the wrong problem or the wrong cause for the wrong problem. And it's, I don't know. I mean, I've been saying this like since COVID was actively happening, because back then a lot of people were talking about it in the context of trust. And I've been saying ever since, pretty much, I feel like, just repetitively until I'm blue in the face. But like, if you don't trust your people, it doesn't matter where they're working, does it? That's not a problem of location. It's either a problem with their performance or it's a problem with you.
Yep.
So forcing them into the office isn't going to solve that. You still won't trust them.
Exactly.
I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. No, the purpose is so important. I do know some companies where they like. I worked with a manufacturing company, and they literally have to get around a table with a part and think like there's a mind meld and a collaboration process and being in person.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fair. There's purpose to that. There's meaning to that. And it's not because I'm trying to control or I distrust you. It's because we need to work on this together, and this is the best way for us to do it. We all know that. It can go, I mean, with great power comes great responsibility. It reminds me of that first example we talked about with meetings, and the leader saying, we need to have agendas and briefings sent out in advance, but I'm not going to do it like that. It's the same idea.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, there's so many parallels there, aren't there? Like defining what it is and how it should work and what doing it right looks like and why. And yeah, absolutely. Definitely a parallel there. Yeah. I mean, I definitely see the value of face-to-face, but I also see it's way more powerful. Like you've got so much more scope and freedom if you're not tied to a physical location. I mean, like this conversation right now, for example, if I was a face-to-face only podcast, I'd have about 4 episodes and that'd be it.
There's so much beauty in this digital world, but again, it's I want to be innovative and new, and I see myself as this creative new business, and yet I'm falling into these old traditional structures as habit, right? Because that's the way we do things. And are you living that, really?
Yeah. I guess it's back to self-awareness, but as an organization instead of a person, isn't it? And yeah, whether you're saying these are your values because they really are, or because you want to be perceived as having those values. And yeah, it all gets very complicated, doesn't it?
Humans are hard.
Indeed. Okay, 2 questions left, and they're the sort of semi-serious fun ones. So the first one is the time travel question. If you could go back and start your career over again, is there anything you would do differently?
I wouldn't necessarily change any of the big decisions or things that I did or jobs that I took. I think they all had a time and a place for me and helped me build up. The one thing I wish I would have done sooner is, and it's tied to meetings, honestly, sadly enough, is do a better job of clarifying how we work together and creating meeting structures to collaborate and meeting structures to make decisions and move the company forward. I was one of those people who mushed everything together and thought that if we just get in a call, we can figure this out and we'll just, keep moving. But I didn't provide the structure needed to be able to make real progress on things. And I wish I would have done that sooner. Once I made that shift, it changed everything for myself and for my teams. And that was a huge lesson. Huge lesson. Yeah.
I've never thought about this before, but now that you've said it, I think I would change my approach to meetings as well. I would push back more on all the unnecessary pointless ones. I feel like I wasted like a third of my life in those meetings.
I used to spend almost 8 hours a day in Zoom meetings and then have to catch up on work in the evenings at night. Like it was ridiculous. And for what? Yes, many of them were important client meetings, but I guarantee you, had we clarified things better, had purpose behind them and structures behind them, we could have met a quarter of the time and made 10x the progress we did in that time. So lessons learned.
Not to one up you or anything, but I wish mine had been Zoom meetings. At least then I would have been comfortable, and I would have been seeing those cheap IKEA office chairs and I definitely like, if I could change one thing now, I've changed any previous answers have gone in the bin now. It's about meetings. And the way that we approach them as well. I would have been more vocal about, no, we need to actually do things like set agendas, and everyone has already considered all of the material before we arrive. It's not just a transmission of information that you should already know because it's your job, quite frankly. Like the purpose of the meeting is arrive, gather, make a decision, leave. That's it.
And for anyone listening, if you take anything from this conversation, like that's the thing. It's not, the meeting isn't the meeting, right? The meeting is not the meeting. It's the before and the after. How do you prepare for meetings, set people up for success? How do you define the meeting, execute it? And then after the meeting, what happens then, right? If you can clarify that across all your meetings, you will transform your organization. You're welcome.
Yeah, 100%. And funnily enough, you'll probably end up with happier people as well, because they don't feel like they're just draining their life away listening to you talk. Like,
yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, well, it's time for my favorite question now. It's leadership heroes.
Leadership heroes.
So if you had to pick one person, but it can be anyone you can think of, literally, like alive or dead, past or present, real or fictitious, but someone who, in your opinion, perfectly embodies leadership. So who is that for you and why?
There are so many I could go for, but I'm going to go for someone alive who I really look up to. And this might be an odd one, but it's Brian Scudamore, who is the CEO and founder of 1-800-GOT-JUNK, fellow Canadian. And you might have seen him on Dragon's Den on TV. So the beauty of his leadership is he's culture and people first, clearly codified values and structures. And it's one of the reasons why they were able to grow that company so rapidly, so beautifully. Franchises operate smooth. It's not because, yes, of course, they have a great product. Yes, they have great operation. It's because every team across the board knows what good looks like, knows how we do things here, and is aligned and supported and valued. And that to me is such a beautiful way to lead. And you can tell by the way that he communicates with people, interacts with people. It's such a passion. Personal story though, I have had a leadership crush on Brian for many years, and the co-founder of the organization I was in previously knew him personally. And my headshot at the time for probably 10 years was me with a banana phone, oddly enough. And I realized his was too. So jokingly, I told her, oh, tell him I have the same headshot when you see him. She managed to find a banana, get Brian on a call, and send me a voice message, like a video message of him talking to me through the banana phone. I still watch it to this day and just die inside. It's just one of my favorite things that has ever been gifted to me was that. So yeah, I highly recommend checking him out. It's just, he's a fantastic leader. Huge fan.
Amazing. I think leadership crush is my new favorite phrase there as well. Yeah. That's good.
Write that down.
Yeah. Amazing. I'm going to look into him because not being in Canada, I've never heard of him. But it's a good story though. And I love the personal connection there too. That always makes it better. And bonus points because no one's chosen him before.
Yes. Winning again.
Awesome. Well, Mickey, this has been really good fun. Last small thing I will ask you is if anyone in the audience would like to know more about you or about Loyalty Ops, where can they go to learn more? What's the addresses, etc.?
Yeah, head to loyaltyops.com. On there, if you're interested, so we have that clear intent playbook where you define who you are, what you do, why you do it, and where you're going as a company there for free. Full playbook. It's the one we run live with clients. You can take it and use it. It's a fantastic tool. Highly recommend grabbing it at the website. Or you can find me on LinkedIn at Hey Mickey Anderson. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Love to have conversations, so you can check me out there.
Awesome. Well, I'll pop those links in the show notes for everyone as well, so it'll be easy to find. And that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. It's been a pleasure.
Mickey, thank you again so much for your time today. It was great to finally get you on the show after a few years of conversations on and off. And what a great conversation this was. So many great tips there for leaders who might be struggling with that culture, who are unclear about how they can create and maintain one of those high-performing teams that are often the key to the success of any business. So listener, viewer, do hit that link in the show notes, visit Loyalty Ops, Mickey's website, learn more about that concept and how it works, particularly if you are a small business with about 30 or more people and you're struggling with some of these challenges around culture, team performance, and leadership. And if you are one of those new leaders who is feeling a bit unsupported right now, you're feeling that imposter experience, perhaps your confidence has taken a knock because you were pushed in at the deep end without any training or development or real support from your own boss and manager, then I know that feel. I've been in those shoes, unfortunately. When I first stepped into a leadership role, I do remember that quiet pressure, like everyone else had the instruction manual except me. The spoiler there being that nobody did really. And I cared so much about getting it right, but I felt completely alone. That feeling of loneliness, of isolation, of just a lack of support can be really dominating when you're taking your first steps into leadership and management. And I'm sure many of you in the audience will feel that too. And this is why this podcast, Leading with Integrity, exists. And it's why it's free and always will be. It's also why I'm building the Integrity Leaders community to make sure that no new leader ever has to navigate these issues alone. Inside the community, you will find, I hope, warmth, but definitely real conversations, people who genuinely want you to succeed, not just as a leader, but as a human being. And people who are in that similar stage or they have recently been in that position themselves. So you can network, you can get to know each other, you can commiserate, share experiences, celebrate each other's successes. You will also benefit from everything else the community has to offer, which includes events, leadership resources, knowledge base, development courses, and access to me and my time as well, of course. So if you are tired of pretending that you've got it all figured out, come and join us today. You can start for free as a leadership explorer. You can meet some of your crew aboard the Starship Integrity. You can breathe a little easier knowing you don't have to carry this by yourself. And then when you're ready, there are paid tiers available as well. Again, all very much designed with leaders like you in mind who don't have access to those development resources from their employer, but also don't want to depend on their employer for them. So it's designed to be affordable. There will be no 4-figure, 5-figure leadership executive development programs here because that's not what it's for. Link is in the show notes. It's on the screen, as is the podcast listener exclusive discount code, which will get you 50% off if you join the first paid tier. If you have any questions, my LinkedIn details are down there as well. Reach out. Let's have a conversation. Always happy to talk leadership with no pressure, no obligation, no expectation whatsoever, other than just a good conversation about leadership, I hope. That's all from me today. Hope to meet you very soon, have that conversation, perhaps welcome you aboard the community. And that's all I've got time for today. Happy April Fool's Day as well, I should say. This is a real episode, not a pretend one, in case you hadn't figured that out by now. I did think about doing a joke episode, but I couldn't come up with a funny enough idea, so I didn't. Anyway, hope to see you again next week when I'll be joined by my next guest, Joyce Odidson, for a conversation about resilience, workplace conflict, and her trademarked approach to these problems, which is called resilience mapping. So tune in again next week to find out more about all of that. Until then, have a great rest of your week and be a leader, not a boss.